All right, so the trade deadline is coming up tomorrow, 4 o'clock Eastern time. Jonathan Jones joins us here to talk about some teams who could be buyers or sellers. The Packers, look, Aaron Rodgers is going to turn 39 this season. They're running out of opportunities. Can't possibly imagine they're going to be sellers at the deadline. Who might they be looking to add?
Yeah, you're right, Chris. You can't really imagine that they're going to be sellers. I will tell you this, though. I did have a couple of sources over the weekend sort of speculate maybe the Packers sell a little bit and try to run this thing back next year. I don't buy that, but, crazy things always happen in the NFL, so just sort of putting that out there. Meanwhile, here in reality, if they are indeed going to be buyers, you have to imagine that they're going to try to get a wide receiver. And last night against the Buffalo Bills, you saw Aaron Rodgers was able to link up with Romeo Doubs and Samori Toure, and so that was nice. But now you look at the available wide receivers, or at least the wide receivers that we believe will be available. Now, Nelson Aguilar, a lot of folks are calling about him, the speedster there in New England. Jerry Jeudy, I think everyone believes, is a guy who can be had for the right price. It's just a matter of if you want to give the right price, if you believe that he's worth a second-round pick. The Broncos are not going to be getting a first-round pick for him. Chase Claypool, sort of a similar situation there, a guy that the Steelers would part with. But again, is it worth what the compensation ultimately would be to let him go? Really, the one that I would keep a very close eye on is Brandon Cooks. He's a veteran wide receiver. He's a guy who every year, it's seemingly on a different team, is able to go in and catch 1,000 yards. The sort of complicating factor here is that he has a base salary next year that is guaranteed. And when you look at it, would Houston be willing to take a higher draft pick and eat some of that salary? It's a base salary of the minimum this year. I think it's $18 million or so next year in base salary. And so how much would Houston be willing to eat? That depends on what the draft pick compensation would be. And so if the Packers are interested in getting a veteran, because they have plenty of young guys over there, they need a guy that can get instant rapport with Aaron Rodgers. Look no further, I believe, than Brandon Cooks. It's just probably going to cost you a second, maybe even a first, if you want Houston to take all that contract for next year.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a somewhat similar spot, same record, 3-5, old quarterback, failing offense to this point. The difference is they're in an extremely winnable division. Where might they be looking at to add at the deadline here ahead of tomorrow?
Well, you can never have enough weapons for Tom Brady, and so we can talk about the wide receivers that we just looked at right there on the market, copy and paste in terms of that position. You can look along the offensive line. It's not like teams are willing to let go of very good guards and centers right now. You could call the Patriots for Isaiah Wynn, the tackle, but you don't really need that position so much as interior offensive linemen. And so because of that, I don't know really where they would go. And then lastly, Shaq Barrett, coming off that torn Achilles that took place this past week. He just was placed on the injured reserve, and so perhaps the Bucs would look at some linebacker help. Obviously, 3 positions of need for this team. But Chris, you said it. They're close, even if they seem like they are very far away because of how much this division has been struggling. Not at all out of it by any stretch of the imagination. So maybe they can engineer a trade to get them over the hump because, listen, we all understand it. This is a Buccaneers team that is probably seeing its last days with Tom Brady. He's not going to be back next year. Based on his play recently, certainly hope that he's not back next year. And so if you know that things are going to get blown up in 2023 and you're going to be rebuilding anyway, why don't you just go ahead and trade one of those draft picks in order to make sure that you can make it work here in this last dance?
Continuing with this theme, how about another 3-5 team with an older, big money quarterback, the Denver Broncos? Now, they're coming off a win, but could they still be looking at selling ahead of the deadline?
In talking with folks around the league, Chris, the thing that I keep hearing is that general manager George Paton absolutely wants to get some of his draft picks back from that trade to the Seattle Seahawks in order to secure Russell Wilson. Then, of course, giving him that nearly $250 million contract. And so it seems a little incongruent, right, that you're going to be sellers coming off that win and you're hoping and hopes are high that you're going to be able to win this year. But look, Bradley Chubb knows it. Everyone around the Denver Broncos, they know it, that he can absolutely be had by Tuesday's 4 p.m. Eastern trade deadline. I believe that it is between him and Jerry Jeudy in terms of the two Broncos who would ultimately be moved, if one of them would be moved, perhaps both of them. It doesn't seem like anyone's interested in the tight end Albert O. KJ Hamler is out there as well, but it really does kind of come down to a Bradley Chubb or a Jerry Jeudy in my estimation, and what I'm talking with folks about, sending one of those guys or both of those guys off and getting some draft pick compensation back, because it's not just about 2022 for these Broncos. That's not why you gave Russell Wilson the deal that you gave him. You believe that this is going to be a team that maybe it's not going to be competitive, all that competitive this year, but you will be more competitive in the next couple of years. Well, go ahead and start getting some of those draft picks back, and sometimes you have to make painful moves, and one of them would certainly be sending away one of your better pass rushers, if not your best pass rusher, in Bradley Chubb, but a lot of interest around the league in him.
So who are some teams interested in Chubb and maybe some other pass rushers out there like Josh Allen from Jacksonville?
Yeah, the Los Angeles Rams are hot and heavy interested in a pass rusher. You know, the Philadelphia Eagles sort of scratched that itch last week when they traded for Robert Quinn, and the Rams were relieved because they viewed the Eagles as some of their main competition for a pass rusher. Well, they didn't believe that Robert Quinn was going to be making a reunion with the franchise, and so they were happy that the Eagles took care of a guy that they didn't have on their list. The Kansas City Chiefs are another team that you could see being in the mix for an edge rusher. Again, you're talking about who they're competing for. The Denver Broncos would be foolish to trade Bradley Chubb to the Kansas City Chiefs. I cannot imagine that that would ever happen. And so because that would not happen, you can't really say that those two teams are competing for the same player. A couple other teams that may be interested, the Miami Dolphins perhaps, maybe the Jets, but I'm really keeping an eye on the Chiefs and the Rams. The Rams absolutely want to go out there and make a trade. You also, again, have the Chiefs, who I do not get the impression at all that they're done just with Kadarius Toney. They have a number of draft picks upcoming in 2023. A lot there in day 2, the start of day 3, that they can deal and package together. So those are the two teams I'm looking at the edge rusher position.
Okay, let's go to the NFC East, where we have a bunch of teams that think they're contenders right now. There are 3 teams at 6-2 or better. The NFL's only unbeaten team, and the Eagles, who have already made a move on the market. Who's going to be active, and what will they be looking for?
It's interesting. I could see the Eagles still making a deal, not the sort of deal like a C.J. Gardner-Johnson or a Robert Quinn, but they still may get something done here by tomorrow's deadline. Again, lower level. You look at the Dallas Cowboys, and they clearly need wide receiver help. You like what they're doing right now that Dak is back, but it was against the Detroit Lions. They may very well try to identify a wide receiver, perhaps a Cedric Wilson Jr. now in Miami, sort of getting edged out there in Miami with how great Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are playing down there. So I believe that's a possibility. And then lastly, the New York Giants, a team that was supposed to stand pat at the trade deadline, and then they got a 3rd and a 6th for Kadarius Toney, the injured Kadarius Toney. I don't think the Giants anticipated or expected that they were going to get an offer for Toney that would come in like that. Once they did, their fortunes changed. I think the calculus changed for the Giants, and they said, well, now that we have this 3rd round pick and this 6th round pick, perhaps we, with a window right here, can go ahead and turn those around and get a low-cost player with one or both of those picks. And so 3 of those 4 teams could absolutely be active. And then lastly, the Washington Commanders. I don't think it's been any secret for some time. The Commanders and William Jackson, the corner, would probably like to part ways at some point. I don't know that the Commanders are going to get a taker for William Jackson, but that is probably their top guy that's out there on the block, and I'm not sure that they're really interested in bringing anyone in right now.
All right. Let's look forward to the next 24 hours or so. Might be busy for some NFL teams. Jonathan Jones with us here ahead of the trade deadline at 4 o'clock Eastern tomorrow. After the deadline passes, a few hours after, it's Inside the NFL, 9:30 Eastern Time, Tuesday nights on Paramount+. Inside the NFL, covering every game every week with trademark highlights from NFL films and a bunch of sound and wired segments as well.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.